Următorul speaker, practic am văzut branduri locale și modul în care folosesc spațiul digital. Am văzut branduri din țara mai mult sau mai puțin vecină. Vom trece mai departe la branduri care se adresează unui target foarte nișat și modul în care folosesc aceste branduri în mediul digital. Russ Lidstone, CEO al Havas Worldwide London.
That was my mum in the audience. Thank you very much. Who's hungry? Okay, so I'm not sure whether this is called the graveyard slot, when people are actually desperate to have their lunch, or whether it's better to come after lunch when everyone is asleep. But I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experiences as CEO of Havas Worldwide in London, in terms of how we've evolved our proposition and our content to make the most of the digital landscape that we have seen many presentations about today. For those of you who don't know, Havas Worldwide, we are a major network across the world. We have 233 offices in over 70 markets. The London office is what would be classically determined as a top 5 or top 6 agency in the UK. So we have a range of clients, some of which I'll talk about in a moment, to use as examples of the way that we've tried to adapt our content and our thinking to ensure that we're developing brands beyond the banner. So, some people may be mistaken in thinking that agencies like ourselves and clients that we work with assume that the consumer, the target audience, think about advertising in this way, particularly online. Cool, another banner ad. My presentation today is not an attack on banner ads, of course. Display, advertising, banners are fundamental parts of marketing plans, digital communications plans. There will always be a need for targeted reach and exposing people to messages and awareness at the right times, in the right places. But of course, the landscape has changed significantly, and the opportunities to move away from click to transact to a more holistic view of how to build brands in the digital landscape exists. And just to give you a sense of the landscape that we now operate in, this is one of my favorite charts that I stole from someone else called globe.com. You can look it up online. In the last 60 seconds since I've been talking, this is what has happened around the world. So let me just pull out a couple of key statistics. There have been 11 million conversations on Messenger. 1,100 acres of farmland have been farmed in Farmville. That's a lot of farm. What is my favorite? There is something like 2 million internet users watch pornography in the last 60 seconds. Some of you here may be actually doing that as I'm presenting. I'm sure it might be much more entertaining. But this is the landscape that we now operate in. You know, you've seen a lot of statistics today. This is the kind of landscape that brands have to operate in, agencies have to operate in order to engender interest, to engage people. You know, the days when I came into the advertising industry of being able to put out a message and hope, largely assume that people would see it, are gone. We're in the content game. We're in the content game, and so are Facebook, and so are Google, and so are Yahoo, and everyone else. So I was in Los Angeles a while ago. The studios are in the content game. This is the market we're in, and that's how we need to evolve our proposition and our content to ensure that we capture a user's, a viewer's, a consumer's imagination. So, not to labour the point, but my agency, as CEO 4 years ago, was what was termed an advertising agency. It's still an advertising agency, but what advertising means today is something very, very different. It means all these things. A lot of the content that we generate now as an agency on behalf of our clients, I couldn't really describe it as advertising in a kind of an above-the-line way. I couldn't really describe it as PR in a traditional PR way. You could argue it's social, but actually it's not. You could argue that it's digital. Well, of course it is. Digital is another channel, it offers up massive opportunities to engage people and interact with people. So at the heart of what we do now is content, and social and strategy and PR are fundamental pillars. So our agency has evolved into one homogeneous offering that offers all these things on one P&L, which means that for a client, we're not arguing over different budgets. We're trying to do the right thing to deliver against their communications and marketing objectives. So, the way I see it, and this is a very simplistic model and very simplistic approach, is that a quick history of e-communications. Back in the old days, 1987, when QuickTime was invented just soon after Apple had kind of brought it to the fore, when I first started working in the advertising industry, the thing called the World Wide Web arose. Basically, we were using digital as a way of explaining things. It was about putting content online. It replaced brochures, it replaced news content. Yes, there was some interaction, but essentially it was about explaining things. And as we became slightly more sophisticated, it became explaining and evidencing things. So we were able to measure. It became the home of direct response marketeers, the ability to demonstrate how many people had interacted with your brand, how many people had actually clicked through, how many people had actually bought online. We moved from explain to explain and evidence. But today, ladies and gentlemen, I would posit that actually we're in a very different world. Of course, those things are still important, but I believe that there are a number of other E's in communication that are fundamental and important to brand engagement, to ensuring that brands do well online. So I'm going to take you through Lidstone's 8 E's of digital communications and bring them to life, hopefully, with a few examples and case studies. So the first thing is elaborate and engage. Here we represent a number of brands who have told their story in advertising, direct response media, and experiential for a number of years. But what the digital landscape that we looked at earlier enables us to do is to elaborate on that story, for a creative industry, the ability to talk more about a brand story in all the channels available, be it through social, be it through online, be it through Pinterest, whatever. The richness there is unbelievable. So for us, it represents a fantastic opportunity. And of course, we have the opportunity to engage people on a much higher level as well. An example of this is some work that we've just recently done for Pernod Ricard, whose biggest brand, Chivas Regal, is the #2 whiskey brand in the world. We do all their communications around the world in over 60 markets. The Chivas brand and the campaign that we've been running for a number of years now is centered around a notion called chivalry. Live with chivalry. It's about a code of honor amongst men, our target audience for whiskey. It's about camaraderie and doing the right thing. Now, we've told this story in bar. We've encouraged people to understand the notion of chivalry through advertising. But of course, there are also restrictions around advertising globally. There are dark markets where we can't advertise. So the challenge has been to drive people into an experience with Chivas online, hence the engage. And so what we did was we created two short films called Here's to Twinkle and Here's to Big Bear. We used an Oscar-winning director to create the films. They are quite special. If you go online, you'll be able to see them. And we put the content on the Chivas.com website in order to drive people online. We used advertising as trailers, film trailers, to drive people to watch the films. And by getting them to watch the films, we got them to interact with Chivas and understand in a much richer context what chivalry meant. So rather than me explain any more, here's a short film which explains the work that we've been doing.
Kicking it back and forth, brotherly for the
What's your problem?
never to be.
How old are you?
And I have to be in court in just under an hour.
Those days playing around always, taking stock of what we got. There's no ceiling to this sky, as our ties will always shine. All the places that we find life. Feeling you right there by my side. Flock of geese that need to fly. There's no ceiling to this sky, as our tides will always shine.
You gotta be kidding.
It's our time. Kick it in. It's our time. Breathe it in. It's our
I think everybody needs a crazy person in their friendship.
to breathe alive. Needed it.
Anyone have reception?
It's our time. Knowing it. It's our time. Giving it. To breathe alive. There's no ceiling to this sky. As our
It's true.
tides will always shine. All the places that we find. It's our time. There's no ceiling to this sky. Stretching back and forth and wide. It's our time. Kick it, breathe it.
So have a look at the films. They're really interesting, particularly Big Bear is one of my all-time favourite films now. It's actually very funny. But the point is, we can all stand here and talk about statistics, and the statistics and damn lies and statistics. What we've managed to do is engage people to come and watch 5 million times films at shivers.com. We've got 1,000% increase in the number of people searching for Shivers or Shivers Regal. So in terms of a presence and building a brand and engagement, something seems to be happening. The next two E's are educate and enrich, and I'll pick up the pace a little bit here. In the narrative of digital, we have the opportunity to demonstrate our brands as curators of content, as editors of choice, to be able to demonstrate our knowledge and our experience of certain markets. And we can really enhance a user's experience of our product or service, or indeed any associations that we have. A particular example that I want to refer to is some work that we've done with Credit Suisse, the global bank, who generally deal with high net worth individuals. If you have liquid assets of probably in the region of $5 million or more, you'll probably be a customer of Credit Suisse. I'm not actually, but they're a fantastic business, but they also have a number of associations because it's important for them to demonstrate their premium quality and to be able to drive their customers to high-profile events. They have an association with things like the New York Philharmonic and the National Gallery in London. For many years, they've sponsored the National Gallery in London as almost an appendage. They've supported it, but the only way that they could talk about that sponsorship was by putting their name on a poster or being present at the gallery. In response to this challenge of how do we make the most of this sponsorship and their experience and their activation around the National Gallery, we approached it in a way that meant that we could reach a very elite target audience, which meant an app, because most people with liquid assets of £5 million have an iPad. And we wanted to enhance anyone who went to the National Gallery's experience of the Leonardo da Vinci exhibition. And again, the case study will tell the story much better than I, but I think what you'll see here is a great example of how digital can really maximize sponsorship opportunity and demonstrate empathy with a target audience.
The National Gallery's recent Leonardo exhibition was their most important event in decades, one that was expected to be massively oversubscribed. Before the exhibition had even opened, there was talk of gallery rage and suggestions that visitors should brush up on Leonardo before coming to spend less time reading the display cards inside the gallery. So how could Credit Suisse, the gallery's partner, turn potential negative PR positive? With an app. With the cooperation of the National Gallery's art historians and drawing on the art and literature of the era, we created a detailed 360-degree view of the artist's Milan studio, as it would have been at the close of the 15th century. We filled it with furniture and artist materials of the era and created an environment that visitors to the gallery could explore to get an insight into the working life of this most celebrated artist. The The result was Leonardo the Studio Tour, an app downloaded by thousands of visitors, which, as well as giving them something to do in the queue, helped them get more out of the exhibition once they got inside. And a sponsor who got far more goodwill from the event than they might have done from simply adding a logo to the gallery's posters.
So, knowledge, experience, curators of content. Credit Suisse now is able to enrich someone's experience. And even as someone who hasn't been to the Leonardo exhibition, you can understand more about the exhibition by downloading the app. Okay, just a quick one. Social media provides the opportunity for nation states to be brought down and companies be held to account, quite rightly. But social and digital also affords us the opportunity as brands and as businesses in our own right to do good and to help enlighten people about certain issues and affect the way that they think or behave. There are many examples of this, and I think a lot of the activity around the removal of the FARC, etc., is a great example of how social media has been a force for good. We recently did something with Peace Day, Peace One Day, as an agency, to highlight awareness of the fact that on the 21st of September, there is a desire to create a ceasefire globally, Peace Day, to ensure that humanitarian aid can get into any war-torn region or region in strife, to ensure that those people who most need aid can get it. So we worked with Peace Day to create the Peace Button, peacebutton.com. Only 19 people in Romania have pressed the peacebutton.com, pressed the Peace Button. So maybe that will go up today. But simply, the objective is to make people aware of Peace Day and for it to build a legacy, so people are aware of Peace Day on an annual and ongoing basis. Lots of agencies have tried to create films and advertising about Peace Day. We didn't. We created the Peace Button, and the Peace Button is quite simply, instead of pressing a button for war, it's pressing a button for peace. And by pressing the Peace Button online, you essentially, your diary, your online diary, marks the 21st of September in your diary repeatedly. So every year from then on, you will know when Peace Day is, so greater awareness arises. So far, we've got about 2.5 million reach. Don't ask me about technicalities of the reach, but 2.5 million, it's been going for a few weeks. We are now at 10,000 people who have put it in their diary, etc. But I think this is just a nice example of how we can do good. We can use digital own means and our own commercial good, but we can also use it as a way of raising awareness, affecting and enlightening people. And of course, digital provides us with a fantastic opportunity to entertain and empower people. It's a two-way street, as someone said earlier. We can engage with people in a way that I could never have dreamt of when I first came into our industry and our business. A few years ago, we won a TED Award for work that we did with Axo Nobel and Dulux. And the premise of the work was that not only would we entertain them, but we would also empower people to make a difference by painting their own communities and improving their social surroundings. This is still a stick for us as an agency. We still believe that if you can entertain people and empower people, you can give them something of worth, something of value, then you are more likely to succeed on behalf of brands. The example I want to leave you with, and this is some work that we've been doing with you, VO5, hairstyle brand. I've been targeting young women in the UK. It's now becoming a bit more of an international campaign. But essentially it takes the two principles of what young women, I'm told, are interested in online. Firstly, beauty tips, styling tips, and secondly, music, original music. The number of artists that post their first songs, their first content online is remarkable. So what we wanted to do with the brand strategy behind it of express yourself, empowerment, we took the notion of a song competition, encourage people to download their own songs and beauty tips for styling, with the aim of winning in a Facebook-oriented competition, a chance to perform at the Isle of Wight Music Festival in 2013. The Isle of Wight Music Festival is one of the biggest music festivals in the UK. So the winner of the Facebook competition will end up on stage in front of 80,000 people. We have already started to generate huge amounts of content, original content from our audience around styling tips. And not only that, we've got many hours of original music and demos. Here's a short film.
Unilever VO5 wanted to break the mould of female hair care advertising. To do that meant changing how they talk to women. So out went the twirling hair care shots and big name models, in came real women expressing themselves. Using two of the biggest phenomena on YouTube, music and hairstyle demos, it started with a social media-led integrated campaign using 3 women with 3 different expressive hairstyles as examples. Further recruits were invited through crowdsourcing, through the blogs they read, the web pages they follow, through their magazines, on Facebook and through TV to enter a singer-songwriting competition, or to upload their own haircare tips and demos, and to discuss hair, music, styles on all channels. The campaign was launched with a unique Shazam TV execution aired during the popular X Factor talent show to prompt engagement.
So, 2 things, I think. One is that, as going back to my original point, I couldn't really describe that as a social campaign. It's got advertising in it. It is digital, but it is essentially blended content. The second thing is the double screening thing that people were talking about earlier. You know, we've tried to start to tap into that with the Shazam app. It was only the second time it's been done in the UK, where people were able to engage with the ad through Shazam, and it would take you straight to the VO5 website where you could post your own content, and soon will become a transactional function, so you can go straight to buy the hair care products. So, to summarize, my 8 E's are there, but ultimately, this rich, fantastic landscape that we now operate in means that for agencies like ourselves and people with a creative mind, this is possibly the best time to work in our business. A few observations and learnings for you before I depart. The first thing is, all those ideas, I believe, and all the ideas that you've seen today that are successful have a clear purpose behind them. Absolutely ruthless about what the brand is trying to do, who it's trying to talk to, and how. The second thing, which is obvious, but it is about engagement. We have an opportunity to spend more time with people, not necessarily physically, but virtually. And what will entice them to spend more time with us rather than go and play all those hours on Farmville is a really fundamental question. It also means that for creative agencies like ourselves, we have to let go of some intellectual property. Most of the content that you saw there, we actually developed and executed ourselves. But, you know, in many, many instances, we work with creative partners because we can't do it all. And that means letting go of our idea and working with the best-in-breed partners. And that's a really big challenge for creative agencies. Breakdown siloed thinking is the same thing, but I would argue, actually, that it is any responsible advertising or communications agency in today's world will not just think about one of those different areas. They won't just be a PR business. They can't be just a search agency. They can't be just a digital agency. You have to take the whole view if you're going to develop powerful ideas. And finally, expose your content in multiple ways. VO5, Dulux, Shivas. There are examples. There are many others and many very good examples around the world. Ultimately, we gave people the opportunity to access our brand via music. We gave people the opportunity to access our brand via interest in film or directors. We gave people an opportunity to post content. We gave people an opportunity to maybe come at it from a cause-related marketing point of view. We gave people lots of ways of accessing our content, and that's one of the most important learnings for us in the last few years. It's no longer enough to just give them one door to walk through. And so, finally, I leave you with someone much cleverer than me, a certain Mr. Picasso, who said, computers are useless, they can only give you answers. And the reason I refer to that is because we have to ask the right questions. We have to ask, what can we do with the technology, not what's the technology going to do for us. And that will unlock better ideas, better creativity, and undoubtedly a better return on investment. Thank you. Any questions?
Întrebări?
Hi, congratulations for your presentation. I have only a very simple question. What's the average budget for a branded content campaign that you are dealing with? The optimal budget, let's say, for a good branded content campaign. Thank you very much.
Well, what you see there is a variety of budgets. So, without divulging any confidential information, Pernod Ricard global campaign, those films are feature film quality. They were quite expensive to make, but the content then was disseminated across a number of channels with quite an extensive marketing budget behind it. VO5 is a local brand, it's what Unilever call a local jewel. The production values are quite high given what we were trying to do, but actually the shoot, as you can probably tell, quite inexpensive, and actually the crowdsourcing and the sourcing and the seeding of activity and the PR was where a lot of the budget has gone. So I can't give you figures, but it's a very modest budget, and it's a 4-week-old campaign. It's still running in the UK at the moment, so I can't give you return figures. But what I would say is that increasingly these days, the opportunities to do things in a cost-effective way, whether you have a big or small budget, are much greater than ever before, when the only answer was a TV commercial. A few pounds.
Can you please comment on what kind of restrictions in the internet for alcohol brand do you have in UK?
Well, the UK has a very strong self-regulation policy. So alcohol brands can advertise on TV after a certain time threshold. But increasingly, it's not necessarily the way that most alcohol brands are operating to reach their audience. Their audience may well exist online a lot more. But interesting, the regulatory point is more relevant in certain markets where you're not allowed to advertise at all. But the UK is one of the most heavily regulated markets in the world across any form of advertising, but especially alcohol. So, as you would expect, the website has to be restricted to over 18s. Where we place advertising is specifically chosen. Any airtime on TV is after a certain threshold. I think that's it. Okay, thank you.
Cine spune că eurile nu sunt bune, ăsta este momentul meu de entuziasm, pentru că mi-a plăcut foarte, foarte mult prezentarea. Sper că și vouă. Îi mulțumesc încă o dată lui Ras pentru că a fost de acord să vină. I just said that I really loved your presentation and I'm thanking you a lot because you agreed to come today. Okay.